everyone. Welcome to my session in DynamicsCon. Thank you so much for voting for my session. My session is about Power BI integration with Power Apps and Power Automate. A little bit about me. My name is Reza Dorrani. I am a Microsoft Business Application MVP, a Microsoft certified trainer, and a very active community member. I work at my organization, Catapult Systems, and my role is the Power Platform Practice Technical Lead. I am also an avid YouTuber. That's the link to my YouTube channel, and you can reach me out on my Twitter handle. So let's get straight into the session, Power BI integration with Power Apps and Power Automate. First, let's try and understand the entire spectrum of the Microsoft Power Platform. The Power Platform is the one low-code platform that spans across the entire suite of Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, Azure, and beyond. And as part of this platform, we have four major pillars. Power BI, which allows us to analyze our data, visualize, build dashboards on our data, run analytics. Power Apps, which is the application development layer of this platform, allows us to build mobile and web-based apps in no time. Power Automate, which is the workflow automation engine of this platform, which comes from Azure Logic Apps. And finally, the latest member of the platform, which is Power Virtual Agents, which allows us to build intelligent chatbots in no time. The context of today's session is around integration between these multiple services. And we're going to look at integration between Power BI, wherein we run our analytics, with Power Apps, wherein we act on our data, and then include Power Automate to add some automation. Now, the key of this platform is in its connectors. And data connectors allow us to connect to our data sources or data services, no matter where they live, on premises or in the cloud. And this entire platform comes with a data service as well that it exposes, which is called Microsoft Dataverse. Now let's start looking into the different integration aspects of these services. The first one is the integration between Power BI and Power Apps. And in here, we can have a Power App visual inside a Power BI report. Now in Power BI, we build our reports and dashboards by adding the visualizations. And Power BI is great when you want to build visuals. However, if you would like to perform operations, data operations, CRUD operations, you want to create data, update data, delete data against your data source, that is not possible in Power BI because Power BI, when it reads the data, it comes in read-only mode. And with the Power Apps custom visual, what Power BI allows us to do is build an app directly integrated inside the Power BI report. Now, once you have that app connected inside the Power BI report, you can pick the fields that you can pass from your Power BI dataset to your Power App visual. Power Apps is running inside the context of Power BI, and the data is coming from Power BI. So as the user is slicing and dicing the data in Power BI by using filters, all that contextual information would be passed to Power Apps. And not just that, if your data set that you've configured in Power BI is configured in direct query mode, wherein the Power BI visuals will directly query the data source to get the data like a live connection, in Power Apps, we have the ability to initiate a refresh of the visuals. And with this, we can build a near real-time experience for users as they are performing CRUD operations on the data in Power Apps. We will be looking at all of this live in the form of demos as we go through the session. And if you have any questions, make sure you post them in the chat. I'm right there to answer your questions. Now we've seen how you can add a Power Apps visual in Power BI in the form of the presentation so far. But there is also the option to go the other way around. What if I want to take my Power BI visuals and put them inside of Power Apps. That is also possible through a control in Power Apps called Power BI Tile. And with this control, you can of course take advantage of your existing data analysis and reporting that you've set up in Power BI by bringing all that information over inside your Power App. Now you can embed a dashboard, you can embed a report, or you can embed specific tiles from your Power BI report into Power Apps. And not just that, you can again here filter your data by using the query string parameter capabilities of Power BI reports. Once again, I'll show this live in action. On the other side, we have Power Automation, which allows us to build workflow automation processes. And Power BI and Power Automate as well can talk to each other. And the way that is possible, once again, is through a visual called the Power Automate visual inside of Power BI. With this visual, end users can run a flow inside the Power BI report. The visual creates a button that the user can select that triggers the flow. And once again, because the Power Automate visual is contextually aware of the data in Power BI, as the user filters the data, the filtered data set would be passed over contextually to Power Automate flows. So very similar experience to what you get in Power Apps. Here we are calling a flow. There we have the Power App running in the context of the Power BI report. And finally, if you want to go the other way around, what are the different actions that we have in Power Automate related to Power BI? We have two things in flow. One is triggers, which basically trigger the flow or start the flow. There are two triggers available. The first one is when a data-driven alert is triggered from your Power BI report. So you can call a flow, take specific actions, or when the user clicks a button, which is nothing but that flow visual that I just explained in the previous slide. And then you can take actions inside of Power Automate. The actions that are available related to Power BI are as follows. The main actions here are refreshing a data set. So you can initiate an on-demand refresh of a data set or a scheduled refresh of a data set directly using this particular action. You can add rows to a data set, and you have the ability to export files, basically export the paginated reports or your Power BI reports in different file formats using those actions that are provided. So if we look at the capabilities here, we have visuals related to apps and flows inside Power BI, and we have controls inside Power Apps to bring in Power BI, and in Power Automate, we have the Power BI related triggers and actions. So there are integration capabilities available for us here to leverage and build amazing experiences. And now we're going to get to those amazing experiences because I'm going to try and build something live here for us to see it in action. So the scenario for my demo here is a table of data that I have inside a data source. In my case, I'm leveraging Microsoft Dataverse. And in Dataverse here, I'm storing information about devices. So let's say my organization maintains or manages devices, device procurement. When a user requests a device is assigned to a user for a specific date and time. My devices maybe have to go for maintenance. So I'm tracking all of that information here in this table inside my database. My example here is with Microsoft Dataverse, but you can use any data source of your choice. SharePoint, SQL, Excel, so on and so forth. Now, in order for me to build a Power BI report first to create some visualizations around this data, I will head over to Power BI Desktop. And right here is where I will try and bring in data from my table into Power BI. Now, inside Power BI Desktop, there is a direct action here available for us to connect to Dataverse. So I'm just going to click the Dataverse option right here. And the first step is it's going to ask me for the environment URL. Now, Dataverse tables that you create them in specific environments, like you can see right here in my case. And for each environment, I have a specific environment URL. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab my environment URL, go back to Power BI, and paste that environment URL right there. Now, the next question is, how would you like to connect your data source, in direct query mode or import query mode? Because I want to show you the live refresh of the data being initiated from Power Apps, I need direct query mode enabled. So I'm going to go ahead and select direct query. Microsoft Dataverse supports direct query. So I'm going to select this and click OK. The moment I do this, it's going to create a connection to my environment, which is my Dataverse environment, and it's going to list out all my tables in that environment. And right here, I will go ahead and search for my table of devices and load that data. Now, once I do that, because I'm creating a connection in direct query mode, it's only going to create the data set or the data model inside Power BI, but it's not going to load all the data here. And that's exactly what it's doing right now, wherein it's going ahead and creating the connections. So once the connection is created to the model, on the right-hand side, wherein I can see fields, I should see my table right here, and all the columns within the table are available for me to select and start creating my visualizations in Power BI. Now, for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to keep it extremely simple and create a couple of visuals. So for the first visual, I will add a table. And in this, I will showcase different pieces of information. I'll put the device ID. I won't summarize this. I'll give the device name, the device status, and maybe the device type. So all of these fields I have added to this specific visual in my Power BI report. And that's the data that's coming in from my database. And this is Power BI. I'm free to choose any of the visualizations that are available here and more. In my case here, I'll add a second visual. I'll pick the pie chart visual here. And for this visual, I'll show the values for the device status, and that will be the legend as well. So what this will do now is it will showcase the count of the number of devices in those specific statuses. And as we can see right here in this specific visual here, I have 3 statuses available assigned in repair, and I can see the count of the number of devices in those statuses. Now, once I build out my Power BI report, next step for me is to go ahead and publish this. And I will save this first. So I will give my report a name, save my Power BI file, and then I'll go ahead and publish this to a specific workspace. In my case, I'll push it out to my own workspace. Once this gets published, the same report will be available for me directly in the Power BI service on the web. Heading over to the Power BI service, if I go to my own workspace here, I should see my report that I pushed out from Power BI desktop. So I'll go ahead and select my report, and I can see those same 2 visuals right now in action right here, with all the data coming in from my database, which in my case is Microsoft Dataverse. So here is all the data, and this is how the report looks like. Next step for me is to try and add Power Apps right here in the context of Power BI, because I want to give the ability to the managers of this report to go ahead and update the status of the device on the fly directly from the Power BI report itself. Updating data is not a feature in Power BI. Power BI data is read-only. And we can bring in that feature by leveraging Power Apps. And to bring in Power Apps, I will edit this report. And on the right-hand side under Visualizations, I will select the Power Apps for Power BI Visual. This will add the visual right here on the screen. I'm going to bring it right here and just position it correctly. Once I have this in place, the next step is to pass the fields or the data points from my data set in Power BI to Power Apps. And I can do that once again by heading over to Fields and selecting the fields that I would like to pass to this visual. In this case, I will pass the device ID. I will not summarize this. I will pass the device name, the device status, the device type, and I will pass the photo of this device. So I've selected 5 fields that I would like to pass from my Power BI dataset. to my Power Apps visual. And the moment I make those selections, the visual now understands that I'm passing data to it. So the next step now is to go ahead and create the app. So right here, we have a button which says create the app. I'll click on create new. And this now will launch Power Apps and build a simple one screen app which will showcase the data that's coming from Power BI. And the way it does that is through a magical integration option or a magical integration connection, which is called Power BI integration. And we can see that in action right here. So for this app, if I look at the gallery here, the data is coming from Power BI integration, which is this object, dot data. That's the data being passed from Power BI to Power Apps. Now we are in the context of Power Apps. That means we are free to design and build our app and connect to our data sources of our choice. Now here, I'll add some theme to my Power App. I'll just give it a dark theme. I will change the layout of my gallery. I have an image of my device, so I'll pick one of the picture layouts. And for the image control, I will change this to this item dot. And here it will list out all the fields that I selected to pass from my Power BI integration object to Power Apps. One of my fields was the picture. So if I select this and if I preview the app, this will list out all my devices, their pictures, their names, and their status. Now in here, the key thing to understand is that this data is coming from Power BI. The data is still going to be read only. Now, if I want to give the users the option to make a modification or make a change to the data source, basically change the record, in that case, I have to connect to my data source inside of my Power App. In my case, my database was Microsoft Dataverse. So on the left-hand side, under data sources, I will go to add data. And right here, I can directly search for my table of devices. This is my table. I will select it. And now I have my actual table, which is my data source, connected inside my Power App. And you're free to connect to any data source of your choice here. If I go to connectors, this will list out all the 450 plus connectors available. Once I have my connection in place, next step is to build a screen so the user can make a change. So I'll head over to new screen and I will pick one of the predefined templates, which is the form screen. So I'll select this. And for this screen, the data source for my form control, I will select my devices table. Now this is the direct table connection of my database. This is not the data coming from Power BI. The data that's coming from Power BI is on the home screen and the gallery. In the second screen, this form control is connected to my data source. I'm going to change the mode of this form to read only because I just want to show the data first to the user. And if I head over to advanced, we have a property called item. Item basically means you have to define the context of the item that the form has to show. And here I will connect it to the gallery in the first screen. So gallery 1 dot selected. So whichever item is selected in the gallery, it will show the details of that item right here. And I can see a few details coming up like the device name, device type, status, and so on and so forth. Here, I will give this a title of update status for the device. And when the user clicks on this little icon, which is X, I'll take the user back to the previous screen. Now, how does the user come to this screen? Well, from screen 1, when the user selects this specific icon, I will go ahead and navigate the user to my second screen, which is my screen number 2. So now if I preview my app, if I select a specific item, so for example, Acer Aspire S5, I select this, takes me to the screen, loads all the data in read-only fashion. If I click X, it takes me back to the previous screen. So now there is a way where user can select a record, look at the details of that record, and now I'm going to give them the ability to even make changes. The only ability I'm giving them right now is to change the status. So I'll go ahead and insert a drop-down control. And in this control, I will go ahead and plug in my statuses. I already had this pre-created. Here are my values, which is available, in repair, and assigned. So the user can make a change. Now, the key thing here is that the default value should be the value that's coming from my data source. If we look at Acer Aspire MA, the device status is in repair. So I need that default value pre-selected. And the way I can do that is for my drop-down control, go to default and change this to gallery.selected, the selected item of the gallery, dot the device status. So now it will default to the actual value that it has. And the user has the ability now to make a change and click submit. Now, when they click submit, this is when I want to perform an operation against my data source. Here, rather than submitting the form, I'm going to use the patch function in Power Apps to patch my data source. So in order for me to patch my data source, my function would be as follows: patch my data source of devices. This is the connection inside the app to my data source. Now it's asking for the context of the record. I cannot use gallery.selected because gallery is connected to Power BI. It doesn't have the true context of the data inside that database. To get that, I'll have to use the lookup function to look up that data inside my database, which is my devices, where the device ID, which is my primary key, is equal to the gallery.selected.device ID. I have that value as a part of a property that I passed from my Power BI report. So that will give me the exact context of the record that I want to update. And I want to update the status of the device. So I'll go to device status and update this to the drop-down control dot selected dot value. And this now should go ahead and patch that specific record and change the status depending upon the selection that the user makes. Now, if I was to stop here, it would update the data in the database, but my Power BI data set would still showcase the earlier information. That's because database has been updated, but the Power BI report has not been refreshed. So in order for us to refresh the Power BI report, there is a property available called Power BI integration. Once again, this magical object dot refresh. And this will force a refresh of your Power BI data set. It's basically refreshing the visuals. So you need your data source in direct query mode. So I'm going to initiate that refresh right here. And next, I want to notify the user that they have made a change. So I'll use the notify function and put an emoji here. Let's say my emoji is thumbs up, status updated. And this will be a success message that I would like to give to the user, and send this notification or show this notification for 2 seconds. And once this is done, take the user back to the previous screen. Now, if I was to preview this app and let's say I make a change, the status is in repair. Let's say this device came out of repair, it's available. I'll change the status, click submit. I get that notification that the status is updated, but the data that I see here in Power Apps itself right now, which is getting data from Power BI, does not refresh. That's because that refresh function only works when I run the app inside the context of Power BI. So let's go and test this out actually in the context of Power BI. Once you have your app built, ensure that you go ahead and save your app. So I'm going to give this a name. Click save. That saves the app, publishes the app. Every time you make a change, you got to keep doing that. Once this is done, if I head back to my Power BI report and click save, and now if I initiate a refresh of my Power BI report, I can see my Power App right here live running inside the context of Power BI. And here my app has loaded. Now let's look at some key things here. This app is getting data from Power BI. That means if I was to refine the data in Power BI, so for example, show me all the devices that are in repair. So I can select in repair or filter based on the status in Power BI. Because I've made this filter, I've changed the data, I've filtered the data, Power Apps is contextually aware of the data coming from Power BI. So even Power Apps changes its behavior. We can see that in action here. It's only showcasing the devices that are in repair. So as you slice and dice the data, you make multiple selections, Power Apps will show that change live. Now here I have 3 devices. And let's say Acer Aspire 1 is in repair, that came out of repair. It's now available for me to assign to my users. So as the manager, I come here, I select Acer Aspire 1, I change the status to available. Now when I click on this submit button, yes, it goes and updates the status in the database, but the magic is how it refreshes the Power BI report to give a live experience to the user visualizing the report. So I want you to keep a close eye on the visuals here. Right now I have 3 records which are in repair. The moment I click submit, this will go ahead and update the details in my database and then trigger a refresh of the Power BI visual. And we can see that live here. The number of items in repair changed from 3 to 2. The table on the top, which was showcasing 3 records earlier, now only shows 2 because the device that I selected and changed the status now has gone into the available status. And if I was to remove all my filters, I will get all the information back. So that's how you can actually create live or provide the ability to your users to live update the data and see that in action right here. Now, this is an example of using Power Apps inside the context of Power BI. Now let's see how we can bring in Power Automate. So I'm going to edit this. And now instead of using the Power Apps visual, of course, I'll use Power Automate for Power BI. The moment I add this visual, the behavior is the same. What are the data points that you want to pass? So I'll go to my table, and from here, I can select the items that I want to, or the fields that I want to pass. So I'll pass the device ID, device name, device status, and let's say device type. These are the 4 pieces or the 4 fields that I would like to pass from my Power BI dataset to my Power Automate visual. Now, once you have the selections made, it's a little different here for Power Automate. You have to go to the 3 ellipses here and click on edit because you are now going to be building the flow. Unlike Power Apps, wherein we went directly to the Power Apps experience, here the Power Automate experience lights up directly inside of Power BI. And here I can go ahead and create a new flow. I'll create an instant cloud flow. That's the only flow type you can create because this visual creates a button in the report that the user has to click so that this flow triggers. And that is exactly the trigger action here, which says Power BI button clicked. Now here, if I was to just add a very simple action and flow called compose, which allows me to create like a static variable, because I want to just show you the values. If you look at the dynamic content that's coming in from Power BI, I get a lot of useful information. I get the ID of the user, the name of the user, the email of the user who called this flow by clicking on that button. So I get a lot of contextual information. I even get the date and time at which the button was clicked. So who clicked it, when they clicked it, it's right there. Plus, the fields that I selected to pass, device name, device status, device type, they are all available right here. And if I was to select any of these, immediately Flow will add and apply to each loop. And the reason why Flow does that is because the data that's coming from Power BI and moving into Flow in this case will be tabular in nature. It's a collection of data. And that's the reason why Flow applies a loop, so you can loop through that collection. Now, in my case, I'm going to keep the requirement extremely simple. The user clicks on the button, and I want to send the information of the data that the user is visualizing in Power BI contextually, send it out in an email to that specific user. Now, once again, I'll add another compose action to show you one extra property that this button click exposes. Right at the bottom, you'll find it. It's called Power BI data. It is tabular data in tabular form. So if I select this, it won't apply the loop. This is the full array of data that is being passed from Power BI to Flow. So here now, Flow has a really nice action called create HTML table. So I'm going to build an HTML table. It requires an array of information that's going to come directly from that Power BI data property. And next, I want to send an email. But before that, I want to even style my email. So I'm going to add some styling so that we can see a nicely formatted table that goes out. This is plain simple HTML formatting. And next, I will go and use the send an email action in Power Automate. And right here, who do I want to send the email to? I will say pick the user who triggered this flow by clicking on that button. And that option is right here, dynamic. What's the subject? I'm going to call this DynaCon Data Power BI. That's the subject of my email. And what does the body of the email comprise of? Well, I'll have my style tag that I created here in this specific compose action, and then the HTML table that is available right here. That completes my flow. I will give this flow a name. I'm going to say email export of Power BI data. I will click save. So I just created a flow directly inside the context of Power BI, and this flow got saved, but I'm not yet done. I have to even go ahead and apply this to that visual. And the way you do that is you get this button called save and apply. It's very important to hit this button, because once you do this, it will save your flow and give you a message that it has gone ahead and applied it. And here's the message. You've successfully applied this to your button in Power BI. Now, if I go back to my report, this is what the visual looks like. I'm going to reduce the height of this visual. It's just a button that the user can click. I will save my report, refresh my report, and this is what the user experience would be like. So my users can come in, look at the data, look at the visualizations in Power BI, update the data in Power Apps, and if they want some sort of automation wherein they want to send a report, well, let's check that out in action right here. Let's say I need a report of all my devices that are in repair. So once again, I'll select the in repair filter, which will filter the data inside the context of Power BI. That same filter will go to Power Apps. The same filter will go to Flow as well. And if I go ahead and click on this Run Flow button, this will trigger that flow that I just created directly from my Power BI report. And once that flow run completes, I should be receiving an email that shows me all that data. And as we can see right here, here is the data that I am receiving. These are the devices that are in repair, and that's exactly what Power Automate has pushed out, because that's the information that it received contextually from Power BI. Now I'll show you one more use case in an integration experience standpoint. Let's use Power Apps and bring in Power BI into Power Apps. So I'll go ahead and create a new Canvas app, use the tablet experience, and I'm going to call this Power BI in Power Apps DynaCon. I'm going to click create. So this now creates a standalone Canvas application for me. Now here, if I want to bring in data from Power BI, I have a Power BI report here, which basically is a sample report that shows retail analysis data. Retail analysis around stores that my organization has opened, who are the district managers, what are the store sales, and so on and so forth. And once again, it's just connected to a data source using visuals in Power BI. I even have refiners on the right-hand side. Now, what if I want to bring this inside of my Power App? Let's go the other way around. So in my Power App, if I want to bring in data from Power BI, you can go to Insert and head over to Charts. We have the option here called Power BI Tile. Now this allows you to bring in a tile, basically a visual from your Power BI dashboard directly here. And I have to pick my workspace. So I'll pick my workspace, then pick a dashboard. So let's say my retail analysis sample. And then I can pick all the different visuals or the tiles that are available on that specific dashboard. So in my case here, let's say I pick this year's sales. So this should load up all of this year's sales, which is one of the visuals inside my Power BI report. Now, if I need additional visuals, or if I need that report here, well, I'll have to keep adding this control. So I can add another version of this control and maybe change this to, the total stores that are opened this year. So here's another visual. So you can add multiple visuals here, but this is kind of adding visuals one by one into your Power App. Now, what if I want to use one visual and change its behavior based on a button click? So let's say I add a couple of buttons. The first button says sales, and the second button says stores opened. And I just want to use one visual or one control here and change the visual on the fly. So in order for me to do that, I'm just going to pick the single visual here. And if I go to a property of this control, it's called tile URL. If I go ahead and just copy this, on click of sales, I will go ahead and set a variable in Power Apps. I'm going to call this variable var, and I'm just going to paste that URL here. Next, if I go back to this control and go back to data, I'm going to change this to a different report, stores opened this year. Now, if I select this, of course, the tile URL is different. So I'm going to copy this, go to stores opened, and once again, set a variable, that same variable, which is my variable called var, and I'm going to paste that URL. So as the user selects these buttons, this variable will be set with that specific URL, which is nothing but the embed URL for that specific visual. Now for this Power BI control, for the tile URL property, I'm going to replace this with that variable. So if I preview this app now, if I click on sales, it's going to go ahead and show me the visual related to the sales. If I was to click on stores opened, it will dynamically change that control and give me that visual. Now guess what I can do here? I can have multiple dashboards and bring in visuals from multiple dashboards into a single Power App. Can't do that in Power BI. So you can mix and match things here by using the simple technique of storing that URL in a variable. But what if I want to bring my entire Power BI report here? So what I'm viewing right here is what I want to bring in there. Is that possible? Yes, it's possible now. If you go to File and go to Embed Report, and let's say I pick Website or Portal, I will go ahead and copy the embed link for my Power BI report. I will then head back to my Power App, and for that same control where I have tile URL, I will paste that URL in double quotes. And when I do this, and I can increase the height, increase the width, make this responsive, dynamic. If I was to preview my app right now, this is a fully functional Power BI report right inside the context of Power Apps. And I can slice and dice my data here as I start selecting. See, this is a live report. I can filter data. I can switch between the different tabs of the report. Fully functional Power BI report inside of Power Apps. That is an extremely, extremely powerful feature. And one last thing as part of this same demo. Here, what if I wanted to change or filter the data as well on the fly? So let's say for this visual, wherein I have this tile URL. So let's go ahead and copy this also and put it in a button here. So this will give me the full report. And when the user selects this, I will set this in a variable. Okay, so that's the whole report. So if I preview this, same concept as before, as I start making my selections, that is once I change this to the variable, as I start making my selections, the visual will automatically change into either a report or a tile. Now, what if I want to filter my data? Where in Power BI, you can actually filter data using query string parameters. So I'm going to actually do that live here and show you that that same technique works here as well. So first step, I would like to filter data by the territory of where my stores are located. So for that, I will add a drop down inside my Power App, and I will load this with information of territories. So right now I just have all Georgia, North Carolina, and Kentucky. I just have a few options in here. So I'm just providing it here. And then I would like to go ahead and append a query string parameter to that specific tile URL. And the way I can do that is simply, and I've already pre-created the code to save time, I'll just simply go ahead and paste this concept here, which all it does is, if the dropdown contains all, do not append anything to the URL that is already being stored in this variable. If the dropdown contains anything other than all, which is any of my territories, then go ahead, and this is query string parameter filtering. Filter my table, my field, where the value is equal to the value that's coming from my dropdown field. Let's check this out in action now. Let's say I go to my sales. So this will show me all my sales that we have made. Now, if I was to change this to a specific territory, let's say North Carolina, it will apply that query string filter right here inside Power Apps. We are filtering the Power BI report. And this is extremely powerful. I can have these values coming from my data source, and I can apply multiple query string filters here. And this works for all of the visuals, whether they are tiles or whether they are reports as well. So here's my full report. If I change this to one of the territory options, you'll see the data will be automatically filtered based on my selection. So that's the power of this feature. And this is possible through one setting, which is very important to note. If I go to advanced for this specific control, there is a new feature here called allow new API. This needs to be turned on. Once allow new API is turned on, the filtering here that I did on the full report will start working in action. So here, show me everything related to Georgia. So here it's just going in and showcasing me that information. So those were the demos around the integration of Power BI with Power Apps and Power Automate. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have any questions, post them in the chat window. I'm right here to answer the questions. And these are the details to connect with me. And once again, thank you so much, DynamicsCon, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you for the community for voting for my session. I hope it was worth it. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching the session. I hope you all enjoyed the session around integration of Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate. I tried to build things live. I tried to show you how exactly these components can work, and I really do hope that you enjoyed the session. I see a lot of comments coming in. I'm having an eye on the comments. Thank you, everyone, for liking the session. I did have a few questions that were in the chat. Please keep your questions coming. I'm ready to answer your questions. So the first question that I see here is around licensing. So I showed about Power Apps, I showed about Power BI and Power Automate. What kind of license is required? So when you're using multiple services together, it works is you need to license each of those services separately. So if I have a Power BI report and if I have a Power App inside my Power BI report, the users who are accessing that Power BI report, of course, would need a Power BI license. That's one. And because there is a Power App living inside Power BI, the users will also need a Power Apps license. Now, if the Power App is using a premium connector, which it was in my case, since I was using Microsoft as my data source, in that scenario, the users will need a premium license to Power Apps. So the answer is for licensing is each component is separately licensed. And for Power Apps and Power Automate, you also need to ensure that you need premium licensing if you are using premium connectors. That was around sharing and security. So important to note, if I share the Power BI report with a user, that does not give the user access to Power Apps, even though apps visual inside of Power BI. So from a sharing standpoint, I have to share the Power BI report, then go to Power Apps and even share the app with that user. So there will be additional maintenance that's required because you're integrating so many services together. But at the end of the day, if you look at the output that these services provide when they work together, I think it truly is worth it because the potential is immense. So those were the two key questions I saw. I'm still looking at I see just a lot of comments around. Great session. Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate everyone for joining this session. I'm glad to hear that the session has ignited a lot of ideas. So that makes me extremely happy and excited. All of the features that I demonstrated in this video, they are all generally available. So you are free to use them today. Scenarios, you have Power Automate, Power BI, you have Power Apps. You got to take into account licensing. You got to take into account sharing. Once you have those two aspects covered, you can really create these amazing experiences. When you bring Power BI into Power Apps, it is still the same concept. the user is accessing Power Apps, you have to share the app with the user. The user is accessing Power BI, you have to share that Power BI report with the user. And the licensing aspect also works same. So no difference whether you go one way or the other. Uh, Another question I see there is, can you display the slide again? So I am assuming you are relating to, and I'm going to try and pop this up on the screen, assuming I have sharing access here, which I think I do. Let me try and pop that last slide. I'm assuming you wanted the slide that has my details. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So I've just shared my screen, and this is the last slide. If you want to connect to my YouTube channel, it's right there. That's my Twitter handle, my email, and my site wherein I blog about the Power Platform. YouTube is where I'm most active on. So of course, if you haven't followed me there, go check it out, see what kind of content is there, and if you feel it's worth it, then do like and subscribe to my channel. Around this integration, I actually did a couple of new videos wherein I also integrate Microsoft Visio into this experience. To check those experiences out, I will highly recommend you to go and check it out. I think it's extremely powerful because you bring Visio diagrams as well into the mix, and then the level of integration just goes a notch higher. So once again, thank you everyone for joining, and keep watching, and I hope you enjoy this conference. Thank you so much.